I'm Dr. John Forren. I'm an associate professor here in the Department of Justice and Community Studies at Miami, and I'm also the executive director of the university's Menard Family Center for Democracy, which is an interdisciplinary center that is jointly housed in two of our colleges, the College of Arts and Science here in Oxford and the College of Liberal Arts and Applied Science out at the regionals in Hamilton and Middletown. I'm here to talk a little bit about the work that we do at the Menard Family Center. And before I talk about that work and how it ties in ultimately to the broader mission of Miami University as a public institution, I want to talk a little bit, first of all, about why we're doing this work. What is the problem we're trying to address? What's the issue we're trying to contribute a solution toward? And to do that, we need to talk about the concept of civic health. And what is civic health? Civic health is basically this notion that you hear in civic engagement circles a lot, in academic circles in that field. It's just this basic idea that communities, however you define those, communities at the state level, local level, sometimes the national level, they vary to a considerable degree in how well they are equipped and what kind of capacity they have to bring citizens together, to cross ideological lines, political lines, all kinds of differences within a diverse community, bring people together to identify problems and then work together to solve those problems. And so when you're talking about civic health, it's basically a metaphor for the health of the body politic, to use old-fashioned kind of language here. But the reason it matters here with the Menard Family Center is it's not an exaggeration to say that everything we do at the Menard Family Center here at Miami, whether it be teaching, service, research, everything we do is ultimately aimed at advancing civic health within communities, enhancing civic health, adding to it, basically, to make our communities healthier in a civic sense. So why does civic health matter? Why should we be concerned with this, basically? Well, a couple of reasons. One is it's a matter of democratic self-government, ultimately. And this is an idea that goes, I've got a picture up here of James Madison, always fun to use pictures of James Madison when you can. All the way back 100 or 230 years ago, Madison talked about in the Federalist Papers that if we're going to have a representative democracy, if people can govern themselves under this constitutional system, we really have to have an engaged citizenry or ordinary people out in the country who are engaged in public affairs, politics, and civic life. They're engaged, they're informed, and they can work together across these ideological, political, and social lines to solve problems and to address community needs. So, in other words, we're worried about civic health because it's important to democracy. You're talking about the health of democracy, basically. Beyond that, the traditional concerns there, we've had a lot of research in the past 20 to 30 years in particular that tells us that communities that have high levels of civic health also have better quality of life along several dimensions. Lower crime rates, typically, higher levels of citizen satisfaction with what their communities are doing, what their government is doing, higher levels of employment, higher levels of social mobility. So in other words, when you're talking about addressing civic health, you're not just talking about politics, you're talking about day-to-day lives of ordinary people out there in society. So we want our communities to be healthy. That's the basic premise of everything we do here. So where are we at in the United States on that ground, basically? And we have a lot of indicators that we have some work to do in this area. So if you look at some of the recent trends, we've seen lots of studies, lots of research done in this area. Americans, relative to other citizens in other democracies, have relatively low levels of participation in government, and that's measured in various sorts of ways. For instance, there's a study that was published, it's been about 3 years ago now, that showed at that point that the United States was 30th among the top 35 democracies in the world in terms of voter participation in elections, voter turnout, ultimately. Pretty low in that sense. Beyond that, Americans tend to be relatively uninterested compared to other democracies around the world in Other ways of being involved, staying up to date on the news, going to local governmental meetings, joining organizations in their communities, leading organizations in their communities. So we have these concerns about civic involvement generally in the United States compared to other democratic systems. Beyond that, we have relatively low levels of social trust. There's a study that was released 2 years ago that showed, according to this survey of the nation, basically, that roughly a third of Americans say that they trust other Americans generally. 2/3 don't. And when it came closer to home, do you trust your neighbors? It was a very interesting question, actually. Do you trust your neighbors with the keys to your house when you leave? Only about half of Americans said they would trust their neighbors that way. So not a whole lot of social trust in that sense. We don't even need to talk about sort of recent trends in terms of social divisions, ideological divisions, what's sometimes called the two Americas hypothesis, or this idea that, you know, you live in Fox News world or you live in MSNBC world, and you have different social groups, different sources of information, and there's relatively little crossing of social and political lines in that sense. These are all concerns, but have been there for a while. But what we're finding, and especially in some research that's been done here at Miami University, what we found too is these problems are especially emergent among younger adults, 18 to 29, 18 to 35, depending on how you define it in a particular study. Basically, what we find is along several indicators, younger adults are less likely to vote, they're less likely to join organizations, participate in civil life generally, than are their older peers. And why this is so important, especially for us in a university setting, is because those patterns, those habits of participation, those habits of engagement set in early, and they tend to track then throughout decades. So if you don't participate as a young adult, you're not likely to participate when you're older. So whatever we can do here to address some of these issues may have cascading positive effects long after people leave Miami. All of that leads us to then, what are we doing at the Menard Family Center? So the basic idea that led to the founding of our center was this idea that we already do a lot of this work at Miami. So we're building essentially in the center on previous work here by faculty and staff and student organizations on political engagement, civic education, and civic health. Lots of examples predate the center and continue on. For instance, the Janus Forum is a good example where a couple of times a year, the university brings in national thought leaders on different sides of an issue to model basically respectful conversation and debate. We have an Inside Washington program that's a national leader in terms of getting our students out there in the field, getting immersed in national policy making, immersed in national politics, ultimately, and many of those students, including my own daughter, actually, when she was a student here, then sort of catch the politics bug and stay in Washington, ultimately. Lots of departmental programs, departmentally based lectures, speeches. We had a government relations network that was very extensive in bringing students to Columbus, to Washington, doing lots of good stuff already before we ever had a center. Same thing is true with the regional campuses. The regional campuses, before we had a center, was a national leader really in research on civic health, publishing the Ohio Civic Health Index on multiple occasions. The regional campuses have hosted 3 U.S. State Department Civic Engagement Institutes where student leaders from North Africa, the Middle East, various countries abroad would come to Miami and spend a month here immersed in learning about American government, American democracy, and some of the challenges we face. We have an annual program, Citizenship and Democracy Week, which is coming up in September, which involves lots of hands-on opportunities for students to learn about politics, as well as the surrounding community members to come learn about it. Debates, all sorts of things we've done. So what we're doing in the center is not necessarily reinventing the wheel, but what we're doing is building upon those programs, integrating them, expanding them, and trying to institutionalize Miami's role in furthering civic health. So what does the center do? We have 3 focus areas, basically. We've been open now for about 2 years. Over a year of that was during COVID, so we did a lot of things on Zoom that we were anticipating doing on campus, but we learned how to do that pretty well too. So we're a grant-funded center, as I said before, jointly housed in 2 of the colleges at the university, and our mission is to create and support direct community-focused programming, engaged teaching, and applied research that promotes democratic theory and practice, enhances our understanding of America's civic health, and builds the capacity of citizens and communities to collaborate in solving problems across ideological, political, and social lines. It's about civic health, in other words. So what do we do? And this is where I kind of boast a little bit about some of our programming. 3 of our marquee programs are immersive experiences for students. One of those, and hopefully you can see those pictures on the slide there behind me. One of our marquee programs is focused at high school students or students before they ever get to college, some of whom may come to Miami ultimately, others may not, but the idea is we can start young in working with them on increasing civic awareness and civic participation. So we call it our Menard Family Center High School Civic Scholars Program. That we had our first full-blown version of this this past summer. And we had 28 students from 9 different states, and so they came to Oxford for an immersion experience. The pictures there show us meeting with the governor in Columbus and doing a Zoom conversation, basically, with the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Ohio. But basically the program is a year long. They come here, have an immersion experience, then they go back home. They then take 6 hours of coursework here at Miami. And then they come back the following year and work on what we call a civic action plan to do actual civic engagement work in their home communities. So that's off to a very good start. Yeah, we also have an undergraduate program for incoming first-year students we just started the first cohort experience for that a few weeks ago, actually. Bring them to campus a little early before the fall term. They have an immersion experience, and then they work with us throughout the year, and hopefully throughout their 4 years in Oxford, to do a range of co-curricular programs, experiential learning programs, and then send them off to be engaged citizens once they leave. Likewise, we have a summer program that we've now done for 2 years, which is essentially an internship program where students, so far we've had students in educational leadership and in journalism who then spend the summer out in civic internships and civic organizations, newspapers, or local educational groups, so forth, and we support them financially while they're out doing that. And also they have a faculty mentor throughout the experience, actually before the experience starts, to prep them for that experience, go out, supervise the internships, then after they come back to Oxford to build on those experiences for their careers and for their future citizenship roles, ultimately. Beyond that, we have lots and lots of ongoing programs throughout the year. Major talks and events. We have a range of talks coming up this semester, for instance. Experiential learning programs, getting students off campus, out into organizations, out into their communities. We have semester-length co-curricular opportunities, a film series, for instance, in the spring that we'll be starting in collaboration with a student film group here. In the spring, we had a series, and we'll do this every spring, we had a series of weekly talks that were on Zoom that were then joined by alumni from around the nation, as well as local civic groups who could Zoom in and join the conversation. All of this trying to increase the outreach and the impact of what we're doing. Very quickly on teaching, first of all, we have a full-time faculty member who's an affiliate of the center, and she is developing new courses. We are part of now the regional honors program over in the College of Liberal Arts and Applied Science. So students will come through that program doing specially designed civics seminars, ultimately. We have a faculty learning community where faculty work together to try to figure out ways to incorporate civic engagement and civic conversation into their courses across lots of disciplines. And starting next year, we had to postpone this a little bit for COVID, but starting next year, we'll have K through 12 teacher professional development programming as well. So again, we're trying to expand the reach there. Finally, on the research side, we have lots of support, and I'm speaking to faculty, staff, and students here at Miami for the most part here. We have lots of support available for civics-focused research, undergraduate research projects, support for translating your scholarly work to public audiences, to present to public audiences, that kind of thing. And we are very engaged now in local communities doing research on, for instance, a very interesting project happening out in Butler County about trying to figure out how COVID has impacted the capacity of our local nonprofit communities to address community needs. So we have research going on, we have teaching going on, we have lots and lots of programming, and that leads me then to my closing thought, which is essentially to say, come help us do this. There are a couple of ways you can support what we're doing here. One is by simply participating in our events, attending programming, and supporting it in that way. And I would also say, if you have ideas, if you have research questions, if you have thoughts about how we can reach out into the community and address community needs, please reach out to me, reach out to my colleagues in the center. Our web site is there. The email address is there on the slide. We would love to talk to you and partner with you to come up with new ways of addressing these concerns.